Hey everybody, and welcome into a new episode of Billikens Beat here at the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. I'm Ben Frederickson, joined by Stu Durando here to break down this week in St. Louis Billikens basketball. Stu, good news is the Billikens are playing, but their hurdles have not exactly stopped. They haven't been their fault exactly, but we've seen a game postponed against Richmond, and then just when you think you got maybe some COVID certainty locked out of the way, all of a sudden they're having plane issues. What's going on with the Billikens, man?
Yeah, they're running into all kinds of obstacles these days. The post-COVID era has not been, well, it's not post-COVID, but their post-shutdown has not been good to them. Besides the two losses, the postponement last Friday was bizarre at Richmond. They end up playing a rescheduled game and losing at LaSalle. And then they couldn't get out of Philadelphia that night on their chartered plane because one of the engines wouldn't start. So they spent the day in Philadelphia on Thursday, came back last night, and now have missed 3 days of activity in the last 7 at a time when they need to be doing something. They missed a game in Richmond. They took a day off Sunday per NCAA rules, and then they sat around yesterday while waiting for a flight home when they should have been practicing back at St. Louis.
That sound you hear is Travis Ford screaming at airplane mechanics in his head. Let's go in chronological order here, Stu. Now that we're a little bit more removed from this Richmond postponement, that was confusing at the time. Neither team was saying much. However, Richmond since has had to pause for COVID issues, which kind of brings some light to the situation. SLU had reason to say this doesn't look right to us, and it seems like that has been the way it's played out. So they probably did themselves a favor by not playing that game based off what we know.
Yeah, Travis Ford said, thank goodness they didn't play earlier this week. It was very strange that day because there was just no explanation coming out. And on top of that, Richmond was saying that everything was fine, that everyone had tested positive on both sides. Everyone was cleared to play, and they kind of insinuated they didn't know why the game wasn't being played. Although there was a 3-hour meeting that day between the two schools and the A10 to decide what was going to happen. Then on Sunday, Richmond announced it was going on pause for the third time. They attributed that to tests that were done that day. So they were trying to, it sounds like, separate their pause from what had happened on Friday. And now it turns out they're having to postpone 4 games on top of the SLU game. So they're in the middle of a pretty long stoppage. So an odd situation that we still don't know all the answers to, but from all that we can tell, it sounds like SLU made a good decision.
We know the answers to the fact that SLU is going to be in trouble if it doesn't find a way to get back on track here. It had a great schedule built up for it before its COVID pause. Now the Billikens have lost 2 in a row, including one at LaSalle. Seeing some trends here. They're not making as many 3-pointers as they were before. Their defense maybe isn't quite as sharp as they were before. What's standing out to you in these games, and what do you think the Billikens have to do to try to get back to their footing? I know it's a lot to ask because they went a month without playing games, but what is Travis saying, and what are the guys feeling like they need to do to get back to being the team they were before they had to take a month off?
Well, the one thing he's focused on today was that he is not necessarily worried on focusing on getting back to what they were as much as being the best team they can be from this point forward, however you differentiate those two things. The 2 losses were similar in a few ways. Their 3-point defense has not been great, and Dayton and LaSalle both hit a lot of threes that were one of the biggest differences in both of those games. The rebounding hasn't been nearly as good. They were out-rebounded by Dayton, and they out-rebounded LaSalle, which is not a good rebounding team, by only 2. Even though they had a lot of offensive rebounds, it was a close margin. They've been a little sloppier. You can tell, you just watch them. If you've watched them all season, you can tell things aren't right offensively, aren't in sync, and they shot really poorly at LaSalle. None of the starters got going at all. And it was really the reserves, Fred Thatch and Jimmy Bell and Demarius Jacobs, who kept them in the game for the most part. Ford, uses terms like, we have to get our edge back, our competitive spirit on defense and those types of things. mainly, I think they really need to crank it up on defense because they're just giving up too many points and too many easy points.
Doing it against St. Bonaventure would be a really good thing for their tournament resume. St. Bonaventure is playing pretty well, Stu. They have I think one loss
Correct.
on their season so far. That would be a great time for the Billikens to get it back clicking in all gears again, because this is a tough opponent coming to town on Saturday.
Yeah, you got the first place team coming in. You can make up for some of the ground you just lost in those 2 games. SLU has seen their net ranking. We were talking earlier about how it was staying so high, even though they weren't playing in that 10 to 15 range. Now they're down to 52, I believe, as of this morning. Not that that's going to be the deciding factor, but the loss at Dayton or to Dayton was not necessarily a horrible loss, even though it was at home. The loss to LaSalle will be looked at as a bad loss, and they've got to start getting some wins against these teams that are pretty high in the net, like St. Bonaventure, which is in the 30s. Rhode Island coming up is pretty high. VCU, Richmond, they'll have another shot or 2 at. So there's still time to add to the resume and get some good wins, but they just they need to right the ship and not have any more of these really bad losses.
Billikens back at home Saturday. Full coverage coming in the Post-Dispatch and at stltoday.com. And stop by next week for a new episode of Billikens Beat. For Stu, I'm Ben. We'll talk to you next week, everybody. Have a good weekend.